final defense for Comfort Payne, and currently 4:03 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Today is the 24th of March, 2025, and here with us is me, Chair Dr. Sri Banerjee, Committee Member Dr. Shakira Kauzi, and then student Comfort Payne. So Comfort, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. I am going to try and attempt the slideshow. If you don't see it, do let me know and I'll just go back to the slide. So I'm just going to try that now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll start then. So good evening, esteemed committee members. My name's Comfort Payne, as Dr. Banerjee has introduced me as. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present my final study today for my doctoral capstone titled Acculturation, Social Support and Immigration-Related Stressors, the Impact on Depression Among Single Mothers, Immigrants in the United States. This research investigated the impact of acculturation and related factors on the mental health of the targeted population, accounting for confounding variables through rigorous data analysis.
Sorry. Sorry.
Can you not see the next slide?
No, I don't.
Okay, I think I'll just go here then. Can you see this now?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, I think I'll just stay here. I'm getting the slides not working. That's fine. So the findings offered valuable insights into the mental well-being of immigrant single mothers and provided a foundation for targeted interventions. The study then explored the methodology, results, and implications. So summary of the proposal. This doctoral study aimed to investigate the relationships between acculturation, social support, and economic financial burden on depression in this population within the United States, using a quantitative cross-sectional design and secondary data from the National Health Interview Survey, NHIS. The study analyzes data from a representative sample of immigrant single mothers, employing a complex samples logistic regression to address the research questions. The goal is to inform the public health interventions aimed at improving mental health outcomes for this vulnerable group. The following research questions were explored, which included number one, is there a significant relationship between the level of acculturation and depression among immigrant single mothers in the United States after controlling for age, ethnicity, and social economic status? Number two, is there a significant relationship between perceived social support and depression among immigrant single mothers in the United States after controlling for length of residency, language proficiency, age, ethnicity, and social economic status? And research question three, is there a significant relationship between economical financial burden and depression among immigrant single mothers in the United States after controlling for age, education, and employment status? So for the hypothesis, for research question one, it would aim to see if there's no significant relationship between acculturation and depression among immigrant single mothers after controlling for the founders. And the alternative hypothesis was that a significant relationship would exist between acculturation and depression among immigrant single mothers after adjusting for these covariates. The variable measurements for this question included the independent variable acculturation level, which was a dichotomized measure combining language of interview and years in the United States. Low, medium acculturation was 0, and high to very high acculturation was 1. The dependent variable was measured using depression indicator, which was a binary measure of self-reported history of depression, 0 being no depression and 1 being yes. For research question 2, the null hypothesis mentioned that there would be no significant relationship between perceived social support and depression among immigrant single mothers after controlling for the covariates, the length of residency, language proficiency, age, ethnicity, and social economic status. And the alternative hypothesis note that there would be a significant relationship existing between perceived social support and depression among immigrant single mothers, even after adjusting for these covariates. The variable measurements for the independent variable for this research question was perceived social support, a dichotomized measure derived from emotional support, and the dependent variable remained the same, which was the depression indicator. For research question 3, the null hypothesis stated that there is no significant relationship between economic or financial burden and depression among immigrant single mothers after controlling for the covariates, age, education, and employment status. And alternative hypothesis stated that a significant relationship would exist between economic or financial burden and depression among immigrant single mothers after adjusting for these covariates. The variable measurement for this research question for the independent variable was economic or financial burden level, which was a dichotomized measure incorporating food insecurity and inability to afford health insurance and income below the poverty level. 0 indicated low income burden and 1 indicated a high income burden. The depression variable remained the same as a dependent variable for the questions. So the participant size and sample size, the secondary data source was used to study this for my study. So the 2020-2022 National Health Interview Survey, NHIS, was accessed via the Integrated Public Use Microdata Series. The NHIS provides a nationally representative data set with robust measures of health, socioeconomic conditions, and social support, making it well suited for examining the research questions. The population from which the sample was selected for the study consisted of single immigrant mothers residing in the United States. The sample was drawn from the NHIS dataset using specific demographic and socioeconomic variables to identify relevant cases. For the inclusion-exclusion criteria, the inclusion criteria included female respondents who self-identified as immigrants, which are those individuals born outside the United States. Respondents who also identified as single mothers were those having at least one child and being unmarried, divorced, or separated. And participants with complete data on key study variables, including depression, acculturation, social support, and social economic burden were included. The exclusion criteria were US-born mothers, those married or cohabiting, and those respondents with missing or incomplete data on the key study variables. A power calculation for quantitative studies was utilized to find out what the average final sample size should be. The primary power analysis determined a minimal sample size of 350 at least. And after filtering using the inclusion and exclusion criteria, the final analytic sample included 5,044 single parents, and 635 of these were known to be single mothers after including my filter. So in the study, I examined the relationship between acculturation, social support, and economic burden with depression among immigrant single mothers in the United States. Given the complex interplay of these factors, the analysis accounted for key covariates such as age, ethnicity, and economic status to ensure robust findings. To assess these relationships, the complex sample logistic regression was conducted as a dependent variable depression was measured using a binary outcome of 0 equals no and 1 equals yes. Now let's go through the results for each of the research questions. For research question 1, acculturation level was noted as a significant predictor of depression in the final model. The OR was known to be 2.471, suggesting that those with lower acculturation levels were 2.47 times higher, had 2.47 times higher odds of experiencing depression. The logistic regression analysis indicated that after controlling for age, ethnicity, and socio-economic status, acculturation did not significantly impact the likelihood of experiencing depression, with P greater than 0.05. Socioeconomic status, SES, was significantly associated, reinforcing the impact of economic stability. Age also showed a marginal significant relationship, which suggests that further research can be carried out to look into the impact of age. Ethnicity was not associated in this model. So for my interpretations of this finding, for research question 1, although previous research has suggested that acculturation, for example, those with lower cultural integration have fewer risks of mental health outcomes, the results here indicate that acculturation alone may not be a primary driver of depression in this population. This could suggest that acculturation-related stresses, for example, language barriers, cultural adaptation challenges, may be outweighed by more immediate concerns such as financial hardship and social isolation in predicting depression. Another possibility is that acculturation may not have a linear effect on mental health. Rather, it might interact with other stressors which were not fully captured in this study. To conclude, the overall model explained 6.4% of the variance in depression, suggesting that while acculturation and the included covariates contribute to understanding depression among immigrant single mothers, other factors not included in this model may also play an important role. Key implications of these findings highlight that interventions targeting depression among immigrant single mothers should focus beyond just acculturation factors and consider broader economic and social stresses and insecurities to mitigate depression in this group. For research question 2 on social support and depression, the overall findings of this model was statistically significant with P equal 0.032, indicating that the included predictors meaningfully explained variations in depression risk. Perceived social support exhibited a marginally significant relationship with depression, P equal 0.114. While the effect was not strong, it suggests that social support may still play a role, albeit potentially confounded by other variables. Length of residency was significantly associated with depression, with longer residency linked to lower odds of depression. SES, social economic status, remained a significant predictor with P equals 0.044, further reinforcing its role in mental health outcomes. Age, ethnicity, and language proficiency were not significantly associated with depression in this model. My interpretations: the marginal effect of social support suggests that while it may help mitigate depression, other stressors, again, such as financial burden, may outweigh its benefits. The significant relationship between length of residency and depression aligns with previous research, indicating that the longer time spent in the US can contribute to improved coping mechanisms, social integration, and access to resources, thereby lowering risks. Socioeconomic status remains a consistent predictor across all models, emphasizing its dominant role in shaping mental health outcomes. In summary, the model explained 10.6% of the variance in depression, which indicates a moderate effect size. This suggests that while perceived social support and the included covariates contribute to understanding depression among immigrant single mothers, other factors not included in this model may also play an important role. The key implications of this finding suggest that nevertheless, given this result, I failed to reject the null hypothesis for research question 2. Hence, while the overall model is significant, we cannot conclude that there is a significant relationship between perceived social support and depression among immigrant single mothers after controlling for the specified variables. While fostering strong social networks is important, economic stability and long-term integration strategies, for example, employment support, access to education, financial aid, may have a more profound impact on reducing depression risks in this population. For research question 3, the findings of the sample logistic regression were statistically significant, with p equals 0.011, confirming that economic factors play a major role in depression. Lower economic or financial burden were associated with lower odds of depression. OR was equal to 0.873 and P was equal to 0.034, suggesting that women experiencing high financial stress had 1.87 times higher odds of reporting depression than those with lower economic burdens. Age was significantly associated with depression, with older individuals exhibiting slightly lower odds of depression. Education level had a significant protective effect, with P equals 0.029, showing that higher educational attainment was linked to reduced odds of depression. And socioeconomic status showed a strong and consistent predictor of P equals 0.005. Ethnicity and employment status, on the other hand, were not significantly associated with depression for this question. My interpretation suggests that economic burden emerged as the strongest predictor of depression, reinforcing the idea that financial instability is a primary mental health stressor. The protective effects of education suggest that higher education attainment may provide better employment opportunities, financial stability, and problem-solving skills that reduce mental health risks. The significant effect of age aligns with the previous model, indicating that older women might have more resilience or stable circumstances compared to younger immigrant single mothers. The non-significance of employment status suggests that simply having a job may not be enough. Income security and financial stability matter more than employment itself. To conclude, the model explains 7% of the variance in depression, indicating a moderate effect size. This suggests that while economic or financial burden and the included covariates contribute to understanding depression amongst immigrant single mothers, other factors not included in the model may also play an important role. Given these results, I accept the alternative hypothesis for research question 3. The key implications for these findings suggest that a significant relationship between economic or financial burden and depression among immigrant single mothers in the US, even after controlling for age, education, and employment status, shows a significant relationship. Policy interventions should focus on economic support mechanisms such as affordable housing, financial aid, and healthcare accessibility to address depression in this population. Additionally, increasing access to education for immigrant single mothers could serve as a long-term mental health protective factor. So how do these findings relate to the literature? The findings of the study confirm, extend, and occasionally diverge from existing literature on depression among immigrant single mothers. By examining the relationship between acculturation, social support, and economic financial burden within the socio-ecological model, SEM, this study offers new insights into the complex interplay of individual, interpersonal, and structural factors affecting mental health outcomes. In research question 1 on acculturation and depression, the study confirmed that lower acculturation levels are significantly associated with a higher likelihood of depression among immigrant single mothers. This aligns with prior research by Salas, Wright et al. 2018, and Berry 2019, which highlight acculturative stress stemming from cultural dissonance, language barriers, and difficulty navigating social structures are a key determinant of psychological distress. Also, this study extends existing knowledge by identifying socioeconomic status as a moderating factor in the acculturation depression relationship. This finding is consistent with Brembrand's 1979 ecological framework, which emphasizes the interplay of multiple levels of influence on mental health. It also supports the work of Jamal Eldin and Windle 2017, who describes how balancing traditional cultural values with new societal expectations intensifies economic hardships and social marginalization for immigrant single mothers. For research question 2 on social support and depression, the study found that a marginal significant association between perceived social support and depression, which is consistent with research by Rady and McQueen 2021 and Hermandros Mendetta et al. 2019. These studies both emphasize the protective effects of strong social networks in mitigating psychological distress among immigrant populations. This study refined the understanding of social support by emphasizing its quality and type rather than just its availability. Research by Liu et al. 2024 and Fang et al. 2021 suggests that cultural and contextual factors influence the effectiveness of social support, which may explain the variance in the protective effects observed in my study. These findings underscore the importance of culturally congruent support systems that cater to the unique challenges faced by immigrant single mothers. And then finally for research question 3 on economic and financial burden and depression. A strong and significant relationship between economic financial burden and depression was confirmed, aligning with prior research by Kim et al. 2023. The study demonstrates that financial strain, unemployment, and housing insecurity are major contributions to psychological distress. The study also extends existing knowledge by identifying education as a moderating factor in the relationship between financial burden and depression, which is consistent with findings by Ryu and Fan 2023. They noticed that the higher educational attainment serves as a protective factor and fosters resilience against economic hardship. This supports the implementation of culturally sensitive vocational training and economic empowerment initiatives. This also suggests that those with education, this also makes me query whether those with education but face challenges stem from them not securing jobs that mirror their educational attainments. My conclusion, in integrating SEM, acculturation stress theory, social support theories, and social determinants of health, this study provides a holistic perspective on depression among immigrant single mothers. The findings confirm existing frameworks by validating the role of acculturative stress, financial hardship, and social support in shaping mental health outcomes. The study extends previous knowledge by identifying moderating effects of socioeconomic status and education, emphasizing the need for multi-level interventions that simultaneously address individual adaptation and systematic inequalities. For example, those who may have high educational attainment but are unable to gain jobs that mirror the education that they have. These insights reinforce the importance of policy-level changes, advocating for culturally tailored mental health interventions, economic support programs, and community-based initiatives to improve well-being in this vulnerable population. And how do these findings relate to the conceptual theoretical framework? So the findings of this study align with an extended social ecological model, SEM, by demonstrating how individual, interpersonal, community, and social and societal factors collectively influence depression among immigrant single mothers. Each level of the SEM provides a lens through which to interpret the complex interplay between acculturation, social support, and economical financial burden and mental health outcomes. On the individual level, acculturation and mental health, explored by Berry's acculturation stress theory, confirms that navigating cultural transitions contribute to psychological distress. The results support prior research indicating that lower acculturation levels are associated with higher depression risks. The additional findings that socioeconomic status moderates this relationship extends existing literature by illustrating how structural determinants interact with acculturative stress. This reinforces from Fernbrough's 1979 ecological systems perspective, which highlights the dynamic interplay between personal and environmental factors affecting well-being. On the interpersonal level, looking at social support and mental health, through social support theories, the study's findings on social support provides partial confirmation of prior literature by Rady and McQueen 2021, which emphasizes the protective role of strong social networks in mitigating stress. However, the marginal significance of the relationship suggests that it's the quality and the type of the social support, rather than just mere social support, that's more critical when it is available for these individuals. Additionally, Fang et al. 2021 suggests that social support acts as a moderator rather than a direct determinant of depression, which may explain the weaker direct association observed in this study. These findings highlight the need for culturally tailored interventions that foster meaningful and reciprocal social supports to mitigate depression in immigrant single mothers. On the community level, looking at economic burden and mental health through the social determinants of health, the strong relationship between economical financial burden and depression is consistent with social determinants of health by Marmont and Allen 2014 and Kim et al. 2023, which emphasize that economic disparities are fundamental drivers of health inequalities. The study extends this framework by identifying education as a moderating factor, aligning with Jamal Eldin and Windle 2017, who highlights how immigrant mothers with higher education levels are better positioned to navigate cross-cultural transitions and labor markets, further reinforcing the study's findings. On the societal level, looking at systematic barriers and mental health through structural inequality theories, the finding emphasizes how structural inequalities such as limited employment opportunities, childcare, accessibility, and health barriers exacerbate depression risks among immigrant single mothers. This aligns with Kim et al. 2023 and Yu et al. 2024, who emphasize how economic marginalization compounds mental health vulnerabilities in immigrant populations. Concluding, by integrating the SEM, acculturation stress theory, social support theories, and social determinants of health, through these lenses, the study provides a holistic perspective on depression among immigrant single mothers. The findings confirm the existing framework by validating the role of acculturated stress, financial hardship, and social support in shaping mental health outcomes. The study extends previous knowledge by identifying moderating effects of socioeconomic status and education, emphasizing the need for multi-level interventions that simultaneously address individual adaptation and systematic inequalities. The insights reinforce the importance of policy-level changes advocating for these culturally tailored mental health interventions. The limitations of this study presents findings that, when diverging from prior research, for example, Hawkins et al. 2021 identified that significant associations between language proficiency, employment status, and depression existed. This study found no such strong link. Methodological differences include measurement tools and additional covariates, which may explain these discrepancies in my findings. The composite measure of acculturation was brought about by combining language proficiency and length of residency. This may have diluted the specific impacts of language proficiency as noted by Hawkins et al. 2021, and suggests the need for more precise measures in future research. Similarly, employment status was not a significant predictor of depression, possibly due to the inclusion of economic or financial burden as a separate variable. The study's cross-sectional design also limits causal inference, making it unclear whether financial strain leads to depression or vice versa. Additionally, being a self-reported data through NHIS, this may introduce bias due to recall inaccuracies and social desirability, especially regarding mental health and financial hardship. Generalizability is also limited, as a focus on immigrant single mothers in the US may not extend to other immigrant populations. Further studies should consider broader samples and an intersectional framework to better capture the complexities of mental health amongst diverse immigrant groups. So what are the recommendations for future research? Number one, building on the study's strengths and limitations, future research should refine the measurement of key variables, distinguishing between language proficiency and language of residency to better assess their independent effects on depression, and adopting more nuanced multidimensional acculturation assessments. Longitudinal designs could clarify causal relationships, particularly between economic or financial burden and mental health, while qualitative methods such as in-depth interviews could provide richer insights into the lived experiences of immigrant single mothers. Number two, by expanding the study populations beyond immigrant single mothers to include diverse subgroups such as fathers, couples, and families with multiple caregivers, this could improve generalizability and offer comparative perspectives on how family structures influence mental health outcomes. Additionally, incorporating an intersectionality framework would help examine how gender, ethnicity, immigration status, and socioeconomic class interact with acculturation stresses, shaping mental health experience. And finally, given that employment status was not a significant predictor, future research should explore how job security, work conditions, and underemployment contribute to mental health outcomes using an intersectional approach. Finally, community-level interventions such as peer support networks and childcare cooperatives, culturally tailored interventions such as bilingual counseling and financial literacy programs should be investigated for their role in mitigating social and economic stresses. So for public health practices, a few criteria that I recommend are: one, public health strategies should prioritize culturally tailored interventions that address the unique stresses faced by immigrant single mothers. This could include expanding access to bilingual mental health services, community-based support programs, and financial literacy initiatives. Policies should also enhance social support networks by funding peer mentorship programs and childcare cooperatives, which can alleviate economic and caregiving burdens to this population when they work. Healthcare providers fall under the healthcare initiatives, which they need to be trained in culturally competent care to better recognize the mental health challenges associated with acculturation and economic stress. Additionally, integrating mental health screening into routine healthcare visits particularly in clinics that serve immigrant populations, could help identify at-risk individuals at an earlier stage. At the policy level, by improving access to affordable housing, healthcare, and employment support for immigrant single mothers could help mitigate economic stresses that contribute to depression. Future public health initiatives should adopt an intersectional approach, ensuring that interventions consider the overlapping effect of gender, immigration status, and socioeconomic barriers on mental health outcomes. The field-based products that I looked at were, number one, a policy brief memo. So this is a summary of the policy brief memo. The policy brief memo drafted focused on advocating for culturally responsive mental health interventions for immigrant single mothers in the United States. It highlighted the high prevalence of depression within this population and the compounding effect of acculturation stress, economic burden, and limited social support. The memo emphasized the need for policy reforms that improve access to bilingual mental health services, financial assistance programs, and community-based peer support networks. This memo aims to influence positive social change, using it as by encouraging policymakers and healthcare providers and community organizations to implement targeted interventions that address the unique barriers faced by immigrant single mothers. By advocating for expanded mental health screening, culturally tailored counseling services, and social support initiatives, the memo aimed to improve mental well-being, enhance economic stability, and foster a more inclusive support system. Ultimately, these recommendations align with broader public health and social equity goals, ensuring that vulnerable populations receive the necessary resources to thrive within their communities. The second field-based product that I drafted was community-tailored mental health services, which mirrors the memo slightly. The field-based product, which is a community health intervention plan, was designed to provide a structured framework for addressing the mental health challenges faced by immigrant single mothers in the United States. This was used to mitigate acculturation stress, economic hardship, and social isolation, key risk factors for depression in this population. So the three main plans were highlighted to include the culturally tailored mental health services, that these were bilingual counseling, peer support groups, and training for community health workers to provide mental health education and navigate assistance. Secondly was to focus on the economic empowerment and help to highlight available resources by providing financial literacy workshops and employment assistance to this group. Partnering with local organizations, I believe that this would help to increase not only childcare assistance, but housing assistance and healthcare resources. And then finally, for social support and community engagement, I propose that by developing community-based peer networks, this will help foster mutual support and reduce social isolation for this population by organizing culturally relevant wellness programs and parenting workshops. How do these aim to influence positive social change? The findings from this study, as well as the accompanying public memo and community health intervention plans, aim to create sustainable, community-driven support systems that are both realistic and able to be utilized. They enhance mental well-being, economic stability, and social integration for immigrant single mothers by leveraging community partnerships, policy advocacy, and culturally responsive care. The interventions promote health equity and empower immigrant mothers to build resilient, supportive networks within their communities. Concluding thoughts. The study highlights the significance of mental health challenges faced by immigrant single mothers in the United States. It highlights that these are shaped by a number of varying factors, which include acculturation stress, economic hardship, and limited social support. While depression is prevalent, traditional protective factors like language proficiency and employment may not always reduce risk to systemic barriers. Therefore, addressing these challenges require culturally tailored, community-driven interventions that consider both economic and psychosocial stressors. Future research should adopt intersectional and longitudinal approaches to better understand the evolving needs of this population. By acknowledging their complexity, policies and interventions can be designed to foster resilience, empowerment, and long-term well-being. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to my committee members for their invaluable guidance and support through this capstone study. Your expertise and constructive feedback have been instrumental in shaping my research and ensuring its quality, even amidst the fast-paced deadlines I've often given you. I sincerely appreciate your unwavering commitment to my academic journey and the insightful contributions you have made along the way. Thank you for being such a vital part of this experience. And to this, I end my presentation.
Comfort, want to start off by saying a great presentation. You've been through a lot of different details, and so I'm really happy for that. So we're gonna turn this over to Dr. Kowsey, and then I'll ask my
Dr.
questions.
Kowsey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only have a few questions, but tremendous job, Comfort. It was a joy listening to your process and finding out what you discovered in your study. So my first question is, were there any of the findings that you ended up with that were surprising to you?
Yes.
And were there others where you weren't surprised? Just kind of talk about that a little bit.
I think that's based on a similar question you asked me during my proposal on what I felt I might, find within the study. And I tried to be very open-minded and not feel biased in what I expected, so that wouldn't influence how I did do the analysis and the study. And so I think at the back of my mind, I was expecting that there should be some high levels of depression based on some of the circumstances that these populations find themselves. However, I was so surprised that social support was not, as highly sought after as I felt it would. So the study noted that it wasn't just having social support that mattered, but the depth of the support. So which made me almost come to conclusion of what's happening in our world now, that there's some people that are living in households that people are there, or they're going to work, and they report that they're feeling lonely. So that made me realize that it's not just having social support, but the quality of the social support that mattered. So that was something that was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting that. With regards to the research question 3 on economic financial burden, I wasn't surprised by what I found, but what did kind of like put another question mark, and if I was going to look at a fourth question, would have been on education, because it did show that the higher the education, the less depressed the individuals were. However, looking at my study, 43.2% of the population had a high school degree or higher, which then made me question, okay, maybe they're having employment, but not in what it is that they've studied. And I've kind of found that in my personal experience, speaking to immigrants, most of them have degrees or masters, but they're able to find employment that mirrors their education. So they're in low paying, low end jobs. So that's another surprise, that I found that though education was marked, most of these people had education, but they were still depressed. So, which makes me wonder, what is it about the education and the employment that doesn't marry that's causing this discrepancy?
Thank you for that answer. I have one more question and then I'll turn it back over to Dr. B. Um, fortunately, you and a few of my other students have come along in a cohort where you have had access to these data sets. And I just wanted to ask what advice, if you could give any, to a future DrPH student um, about the process of how you would go about looking for a data set that kind of aligns with your research interests, and also um, what advice would you give them about kind of navigating that in the current climate we're in, where you're studying a population where these data sets are kind of being taken away from us, right? No one really wants to look at demographic variables that elevate diversity and things like that. Um, how would you talk to them or advise them about navigating that? Because we know it's so important, right, to try to understand people's lived experiences, and diversity is part of that, right? So just wanted to know there's no right or wrong answer for this question, but it's really been heavily on my mind because so many of our students at Walden do use secondary data. So I know when all of this happened, one of my first reactions was like, oh my gosh, are my students going to finish? Um, so it's been heavily on my mind.
I think that is a valid fear that you have. And I'm in such a unique situation of where I'm based. So I'm based in a place that's very rural. And if I was not blessed enough to have secondary data, I don't know if I'd have been able to do the study, because it would have been so costly for me to try and start the data off myself, finding primary information, and going through that whole process. It would have been extremely overwhelming. Even having the secondary data in my disposal was a learning curve. And I feel that unless you're someone that has a strong background of statistics and knowing how to navigate it, you can get swamped up within this process. So I think for a capstone for a doctorate, it would probably take a long period of time if secondary data was not available for the candidates to utilize. Saying that, I do say, and I repeat, I've had two very good committee members have kind of like navigated me into the right direction. So I think one of the things during one of my second year, whilst we're still doing the courses, I can't remember the professor's name, and I wish I could, to give him a shout out and a thank you, was he said work backwards. So you have, this idea in mind of what you want to do as a title, and you may have some understanding from research papers on what the variables are. But if you're using secondary data, you really do need to work backwards. You need to, immerse yourself in the data that's there to see what variable is available to you, because I came across that stumbling block on the data that was available at the time when I started my capstone was not available when I started to write my capstone, especially with COVID. So I had a population that initially looked like I had a surplus of 100,000. But once I started to do the analysis, I kept on coming across roadblocks. And Dr. B was like, you might need to add another year, Comfort. And I didn't realize that COVID, question mark, had made that there was a variation in the data. So for it to still have been relevant, I had to include another year. So to answer your question, I know I'm rambling on. I honestly, I'm fearful on how this is going to affect doctoral candidates moving forward. I'm not sure what other secondary databases would be available for them. The only other thing would be, it might be that the syllabus might need to be looked into, because the time span would have to mirror more primary data being utilized and funding for that.
Thank you so much. Dr. B, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah.
Didn't have my mic on. Dr. Cowsey, thank you for those questions. I think one of the things that I would add is that when they are creating questions or the dissertation topic, a lot of people, they're saying that start with the research problem, start with the different portions, and then get to the research question. But like you said, a lot of that is working backwards. You create a research question, see if the variables are there, go back to the drawing board, change data sets if you need. And so there's a process. So thank you for that question, Dr. Cowsey. That's very insightful. So I wanted to go over, I'm not going to go over too many questions because we've talked previously. So IPUMS versus CDC, right? So NHIS, I think we talked about this at the very beginning, how to access data at the CDC, right? And I told you, well, CDC is all right, but you're going to have to individually download all these files, merge them, and I did that in some of my research at publications and that. So that was the way I knew. But then somehow I found a shortcut, and I'm like, used IPUMS. So IPUMS goes into a lot of the data sets. So IPUMS, how was your experience with using the database? Would you recommend people to use that, or is that something that was complicated?
I think, again, like I said, giving kudos to yourself and Dr. Kelsey, I think having someone to assist when I came across those roadblocks was very imperative, because I think I would have been frustrated in the process. I know every individual has their own driving force on why they're doing their doctorate, and they've given themselves, time span. I had a deadline, so I became more and more frustrated. So I was very, very pleased.
I remember that portion. Yeah.
The data set that I had was user friendly in the sense that if I needed to remove something, it wasn't starting all the way from the beginning and then going through each and every individual variable. So I think that was very key in the process, in assisting with my own personal deadlines and the pressure I'd put on myself. Because there are times that with live, you go away from your analysis, come back, and then you look at it, you're like, what does this mean? I don't understand what this means. And so I think it was so important that we did the statistics course, and it was so important, the advice of making sure that each change or each amendment that you make, save it so you can go back a step to see, okay, why was there that change there? Because again, with my variables, when I put a filter, I was getting results that I didn't understand. I didn't understand
that,
what
yeah.
I've done. I didn't understand why this variable looked like this.
Right.
I was going back and reading the literature, and so the data set was so user friendly that you can save it, and you can save each amendment and remove, and it shows you. And so with that, I really do appreciate having a data set that was user friendly in that way. It would have been overwhelming, again, unless you're someone that, like Dr. Kelsey, has that statistical foreknowledge.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to, it's a second language.
Yeah, that's right. So that's great. IPUMS is kind of a database, has multiple data sets, NHIS, MEPS. So if you're interested in exploring various data sets, then you can do so. So sample size, categorical. Right. So I think you touched on this briefly. The sample size is something that you had to kind of maneuver, right? And add another data set, another year, so that you can have an adequate sample size. So one of the things I kind of wanted to bring to your attention is that, and I think we talked about this when you were running your analysis, is that when you're going through the analysis, then not only do you have to look at all of the variables, like sample size and power analysis calculation, you also have to go into the categories and see if you
Yes.
have an adequate number of, and this is not something that people teach you, because um, we teach that as long as you have a sample size, the categories don't matter, but they do. So if you have if you have single digit yes, then that's not going to work. So that's that. And you mentioned, how do you decide? Yeah, I think that's sample size limited, right? So, and that was the category answer. So you said one place, and I just wanted to correct this. You said in one place you showed a p-value, and from that p-value you said the effect is not strong. So you can't tell that from a p-value. P-value just measures if something is significant, if not. You can't say that this is a strong significance, weak significance. Can't do that. All right.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So those are the comments and questions. Nothing challenging, just making sure you are ready for the next process. So
Thank you.
from my end, great job. I think that you're ready. Dr. Kowsey, what is your verdict?
Yeah, I'm ready to vote.
All right. So what is the vote?
From me, approved.
All right. All
Thank
right. I'll take that. All right. Me too. So
thank you so
congratulations.
much.
This is great.
Thank you
I'm
so
glad you
much.
got to this stage, and this, yeah. So
I've got one more thing to add. Apart from
go
thank
ahead.
you both so much, now I can breathe a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
I've got a good birthday present to give my mum when I call her later to tell her. So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to add, just thinking back, so my study, when I was doing the initial research, most of those studies that I found
Mm-hmm.
were qualitative. There were
Mm-hmm.
not that many quantitative, and I was determined to have this as a quantitative study. But
Mm-hmm.
looking back, I think that
Mm-hmm.
I may, if I was to do this again, I may have
Mm-hmm.
made a mixed analysis rather than a qualitative or quantitative. I
That's
think
too much.
having both the
As a dissertation.
interviews and the statistics would have made it more robust. This would probably be on a larger scale, but I just thought I'd put
Well,
it out there.
right. I'm happy with what you have done here. I
Thank
wouldn't
you.
have this in a different way. So you've
Thank you.
good job. I really have enjoyed having you. Um, I don't get to say this, so I'm proud.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Mhm.
both so much. Yes.
Comfort, I
All right.
encourage you to, first of all, celebrate
Yeah.
a huge accomplishment, but also, once the dust settles, when you start thinking about next steps, those could be, I would encourage you to consider publication, finding a journal that seems like the scope and aims align with the work that you have just produced. And I'll speak for myself and Dr. B, of course, we will support you, because there is a science and an art to cutting down a dissertation to a manuscript length document.
Right.
So once you get there and you're ready, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Same
so
offer goes from me. So yeah, reach out.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate that.
All right, so let's adjourn. Dr. Kowsey, if you had no comments. So comfort. Dr. Payne, actually, like already, you're ready. You're ready.
Already, Dr. Payne.
Yeah.
How do we you have to stop the recording, right?
I have to, right.
I think I'm trying to press a button. I was like, you didn't start it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so very much. Enjoy the
Mhm.
rest of
Thank
your
you both.
day.
You as well.
Bye.
Mhm,
Bye
bye-bye.
bye.